Like, subscribe, and share. Story 1. Voices of the Forgotten. The chilling October air nipped at the skin as Derek adjusted the straps of his backpack. His breath fogged in the night, mingling with the scents of fallen leaves and distant bonfires. It was Halloween night, and while most people were partying, Derek and his two friends, Claire and Jake, had different plans that involved breaking into Ravenhill Asylum, a crumbling relic of a time when mental illness was poorly understood and even more poorly treated. The asylum had been abandoned for 50 years, ever since a tragedy struck on Halloween night, leaving dozens of patients and staff dead under mysterious circumstances. "I heard they all went mad and killed each other," Claire whispered dramatically as they stood outside the rusted front gates, the wind stirring the weeds at their feet. Her dark lipstick curled into a grin. "Perfect Halloween story," Jake scoffed. "Or maybe they just got tired of the crappy food." Derek chuckled, though unease clawed at the back of his mind. Urban legends swirled around Ravenhill, stories of strange noises, eerie graffiti, and most disturbingly rumors that once inside, the asylum didn't let you leave. But that was exactly why they were here. They were thrill seekers, always pushing boundaries, and tonight, they wanted the ultimate scare. "All right," Garrick said, shaking off his unease. "Let's get this over with." They squeezed through a hole in the chain-link fence, their flashlights slicing through the thick darkness that draped the asylum like a shroud. The massive building loomed ahead, its broken windows like empty, soulless eyes. They entered through the rear door, which hung loosely on its hinges, giving off a long, eerie creak as it swung open. "Happy Halloween, Ravenhill," Claire whispered. The inside smelled of mildew, rot, and the unmistakable scent of abandonment. The long hallways stretched ahead in both directions, littered with decayed furniture and yellowing patient files. Graffiti scrawled in wild handwriting covered the walls, phrases like "help me" and "we never left." A few crude jack-o'-lantern faces were spray-painted in orange and black, as though someone had tried to leave their own Halloween mark on this desolate place. Derek's flashlight beam skittered across the graffiti and landed on an old nurse's station, where a cracked clock hung frozen at 11:59 p.m. Jake snickered. They really stopped caring about time here. "Huh." Claire shushed him. "You're gonna jinx us, idiot." They moved deeper into the asylum, each creak of the floorboards beneath their feet causing them to flinch. The shadows seemed to shift with every step, as though the darkness itself was alive and watching them. Then came the first sound, a faint whisper, like a soft exhale of breath, brushing against Derek's ear. He froze, spinning his flashlight in the direction it came from. "What?" Claire asked, noticing his tension. "Did you guys hear that?" Derek whispered. "Hear what?" Derek's heart thudded in his chest, whispering, "Right behind me." Jake chuckled, though there was a nervous edge to it. "Spooked already? Come on, man. Don't make me babysit you." Derek frowned but said nothing. It must have been the wind, right? They pressed on, their footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. But the whispers came again, this time, unmistakable. They didn't sound like words, just dot sounds, faint laughter, fragments of sentences, breaths too close to be imagined. The group soon found themselves in a long corridor lined with doorways that led to patient rooms. Each room was a tiny cell with cracked tiles and rusted bed frames, the remnants of a time when people were locked away and forgotten by society. Claire peeked inside one room and gasped, "Guys, look." Derek and Jake joined her, peering inside with their flashlights. At the far end of the room, a jack-o'-lantern sat on the windowsill. The candle inside was burning, flickering. "That shouldn't be possible," Derek whispered, feeling a chill slide down his spine. "We're not alone here," Claire whispered, more excited than scared. As if in response, a door farther down the hall slammed shut with a deafening bang, making all three of them jump. That wasn't the wind, Jake whispered, his cocky demeanor slipping. The whispers grew louder now, as if they were no longer trying to stay hidden. "Stay with us, stay," the voices murmured, slithering through the air. Shadows flitted along the walls, darting in and out of their flashlights' beams like figures just out of reach. "Let's keep moving," Garrick urged, his heart pounding wildly. "We'll check out the main hall and then get the hell out of here." They found the main hall, a massive room with high ceilings, where the asylum's patients once gathered for meals and recreation. But tonight, the room looked different. Someone had decorated the space with cheap, old-fashioned Halloween decorations: paper bats, plastic skeletons, and faded streamers. Tables were set with cracked plates, dusty party hats, and half-rotted candy. At the center of the room, a cluster of jack-o'-lanterns glowed, their faces twisted into malevolent grins. And sitting around the table were figures too still to be alive, but too lifelike to be mere mannequins. Jake took a step closer and gasped, These are people." The figures were dressed in old hospital gowns, their skin pale and cracked, their eyes wide and lifeless. They sat frozen at the party table, hands clasped together in mock celebration. "What the hell is this?" Claire whispered, backing away. And then, as the clock in the hall struck midnight, the figures moved. The lights from their flashlights flickered wildly. Derek tried to run, but his legs felt like they were stuck in quicksand. He looked back to see Jake frozen in place, his mouth hanging open, eyes glazed over as though he had been hypnotized by the figures. "Jake," Derek shouted, but Jake didn't respond. Instead, he began to laugh, a strange, hollow sound that didn't belong to him. Claire grabbed Derek's arm, pulling him back toward the door. "We need to go now," but it was too late. The jack-o'-lanterns flickered violently, their flames growing brighter and more erratic. One by one, the patients rose from the table, their heads tilting unnaturally as they shuffled toward them. And then Jake spoke, but it wasn't his voice. "The party isn't over. It's just beginning." Derek and Claire bolted toward the hallway, leaving Jake behind. They ran blindly through the dark corridors, the whispers growing louder and more insistent, as though the walls themselves were begging them to stay. Doors slammed shut behind them, forcing them deeper into the labyrinth of the asylum. They could hear Jake's laughter echoing through the halls, growing more and more distant. Finally, they burst through the back door, tumbling into the cold night air. Derek turned to look back and saw Jake's silhouette standing in the doorway, a jack-o'-lantern clutched in his hands. He raised it slowly and whispered, "See you next Halloween." And then the door slammed shut. Derek and Claire reported what had happened, but no one believed him. The police found no trace of Jake or the eerie Halloween decorations they described. The asylum remained silent and abandoned, as it always had been. But every year on Halloween, Derek could hear Jake's laughter in his dreams, calling him back to Ravenhill. And each October 31st, a small jack-o'-lantern appeared on his doorstep, its flame flickering softly in the night. The message was clear: the party never ends. And one day, Derek knew he would return. Story 2: Vanishing Woods. The sky above the forest was a deep slate gray, threatening rain as Olivia and her boyfriend Ethan arrived at the entrance to Hollow Pines National Park. It was Halloween, and while most people were getting ready for costume parties or horror movie marathons, Olivia and Ethan had other plans. Every year, they tried to do something unique for Halloween, and this time, they had decided on a twilight hike through the woods. The park had a dark reputation. Over the years, several hikers had disappeared without a trace, especially around Halloween. Some locals claimed the forest was haunted. Others insisted that the lost hikers had simply wandered off the marked trails and gotten lost. But Olivia was a skeptic. She didn't believe in the supernatural, and Ethan wasn't one to back down from a challenge. "Come on, it'll be fun," Ethan had said with a grin earlier that afternoon, packing his flashlight and compass into his backpack. "It's just trees. What's the worst that could happen?" Now, standing at the entrance, as the wind tugged at the hem of her jacket, Olivia felt a slight shiver. The twisted trees of hollow pines reached toward the sky like skeletal fingers, and despite her earlier bravado, she couldn't shake a sense of unease. "Creepy though," Ethan said, nudging her with his elbow. "You scared?" "Of course not," Olivia said, forcing a grin. "But let's stick to the trail, okay? I don't want us becoming one of those missing persons cases." They shared a laugh and set off, their boots crunching against the fallen leaves. It was 6:30 p.m., plenty of time for a quick hike before it got too dark. Or so they thought. The first stretch of the trail was picturesque, if a bit eerie. The forest floor was littered with autumn leaves in shades of orange and red, and the fading light filtered through the branches in jagged beams. Here and there, carved pumpkins sat along the trail left behind by earlier visitors. Most were typical grinning jack-o'-lanterns, but a few had disturbing, grotesque expressions that made Olivia uncomfortable. "People really go all out, huh?" Ethan chuckled, poking at one of the pumpkins with his boot. Olivia shrugged. "Yeah, but why leave them here? It's like someone wanted to mark the trail." They pressed on, chatting quietly to fill the growing silence. The forest was unusually still. No birds chirped, no insects buzzed. The only sound was the rustling of leaves underfoot and the occasional creak of the wind through the trees. After about 30 minutes of walking, they reached a fork in the trail. To the left, a worn wooden sign marked the ridge loop, which was the trail they had planned to take. To the right, a narrower and marked path snaked deeper into the woods. The trees on that side seemed older, their trunks covered in strange, twisting symbols that looked hand-carved. "Which way?" Olivia asked. Though she already knew the answer, she wanted back toward the ridge loop and out of this unsettling forest. But Ethan, of course, grinned. "Let's check out the narrow one." "Looks more interesting," Olivia frowned. "Ethan, I don't think we should. It's not marked." "Come on," Ethan teased. "Where's your Halloween spirit? What's the point of coming here if we don't have a little adventure?" With a sigh, Olivia gave in. "Just for a little while, okay. If it gets weird, we turn around." As they followed the narrow path, the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees grew thicker, their twisted branches forming a tangled canopy overhead that blocked out most of the fading light. The deeper they went, the more strange symbols appeared: spirals, stars, and runes carved into the bark of the trees. Olivia ran her fingers across one of the carvings. "These don't look like the usual graffiti. Probably just bored teenagers," Ethan said, though even he sounded a little uncertain. That's when Olivia heard it, a faint whisper, carried on the wind. "Did you hear that?" she asked, stopping in her tracks. "Hear what?" Olivia strained her ears. The whisper came again, soft and indistinct, like someone murmuring just out of reach. But when she turned to look behind them, the trail they had just walked seemed different. The trees looked unfamiliar, and the pumpkins that had marked their way were gone. "Ethan, something's not right," Olivia whispered, gripping his arm. "The trail, where are the pumpkins?" Ethan frowned, pulling out his phone. "Relax, we probably just took a wrong turn." But when he looked at his GPS, the screen showed nothing but static. His compass, too, spun wildly in circles, as if the forest itself was refusing to be mapped. "Okay," Ethan said slowly, glancing around. "That's weird. Let's go back," Olivia insisted. "I don't like this." Ethan nodded, and they turned around, retracing their steps. But after a few minutes, they realized the trail was gone. No pumpkins, no carvings they recognized, just endless rows of trees, their trunks twisting like the bars of a cage. As night fell, the forest grew colder, and Olivia's unease deepened into panic. The whispering sounds followed them, growing louder and more distinct with every step. It wasn't just wind, it was voices, dozens of them, murmuring things Olivia couldn't quite understand. Then, suddenly, they stopped. Olivia froze, and Ethan grabbed her hand. "Do you see that?" he whispered, pointing ahead. In the clearing before them stood a massive jack-o'-lantern, taller than Ethan. Its face was carved into a wide, wicked grin, and a dim orange light flickered from within. "We didn't come this way," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. "We should have hit the main trail by now." Before Ethan could respond, something moved in the shadows behind the jack-o'-lantern. It was too quick for them to see clearly, but Olivia caught a glimpse of something pale and skeletal, a figure hunched low to the ground, watching them. "Run!" Ethan shouted, yanking her hand. They sprinted through the forest, branches whipping at their faces and clawing at their clothes. The whispering voices returned, louder and more urgent, as if the forest itself was chasing them. And then Ethan's hand was ripped from Olivia's grasp. She stopped, breathless, and turned around. "Ethan!" she screamed, but Ethan was gone. His backpack lay on the ground, torn open as if by claws, and there was no sign of him, only a single, rotting jack-o'-lantern sitting in his place. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she spun in circles, trying to find any trace of Ethan. Panic clawed at her mind. He couldn't just vanish. He had to be here somewhere. And then, from the shadows, she heard it, Ethan's voice. "Olivia, over here." She followed the sound, but as she ran deeper into the forest, she realized the voice was coming from every direction at once. It was Ethan, but not quite. The pitch was wrong, and the words slurred, as if someone or something was mimicking him. The whispering voices returned, joining Ethan's distorted calls, forming a twisted chorus of sounds that spiraled into Olivia's mind. She stumbled into a small clearing and collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. That's when she saw it, Ethan's jacket draped over the branch of a tree. And beneath it, a crude wooden sign carved with words that sent a chill down her spine. "No one leaves the forest." Desperation clawed at Olivia's mind. She grabbed Ethan's jacket and wrapped it around herself, shivering as the whispers closed in. It was as if the forest knew her fear, feeding on it, drawing her deeper into its embrace. The last thing she remembered was the sight of glowing jack-o'-lanterns, hundreds of them lining the path ahead. Their grinning faces flickered in unison, as if welcoming her into their world, and then the forest swallowed her whole. Ethan was never found, neither was Olivia. Months later, on the following Halloween, a new group of hikers ventured into Hollow Pines and vanished without a trace. The only clue left behind was a single jack-o'-lantern at the entrance to the trail, its crooked grin blowing softly in the night. And every year after that, on Halloween night, the jack-o'-lantern returns, always waiting for the next unworried traveler to step into the forest. Because no one leaves Hollow Pines, not really. Story 3: Eyes in the Wallpaper. The truck groaned as it backed up the long driveway, carrying the last of the boxes. Olivia and her husband, Ben, stood on the front steps of their new home, a Victorian-era mansion on the outskirts of town. It was late afternoon on October 31st, and they were rushing to finish moving in before the Halloween trick-or-treaters began knocking. "Perfect timing," Ben said, wiping the sweat off his brow. "We'll be all settled just in time to relax tonight with some wine and a scary movie." Olivia forced a smile, but she couldn't shake the eerie sensation she'd had since they first toured the house. Something about the place felt off. The air seemed heavy, and the shadows cast by the intricate wooden banisters seemed deeper than they should be. But Ben had been so excited about the house, a rare deal for such a historic property. "It's a dream home," he'd said. "And at this price, we couldn't pass it up." Olivia had reluctantly agreed, hoping that once they moved in, the unsettling feeling would disappear. As the movers unloaded the furniture, Olivia wandered through the house, running her fingers along the walls. Every room felt steeped in history. Some of the wallpaper looked ancient, with faded floral patterns and intricate borders of vines and leaves. In other places, new wallpaper had been pasted over the old designs, giving the house a mismatched, layered feel, like it was hiding something beneath the surface. The real estate agent had mentioned that the house had been empty for years. The last family to live here had moved out suddenly, leaving most of their belongings behind. Just couldn't handle the upkeep, I guess, the agent had said with a shrug. But Olivia wasn't so sure. Why would anyone leave such a beautiful house in such a hurry? She noticed something strange as she walked down the second-floor hallway, a pattern in the wallpaper. Faces. At first, she thought it was just an illusion created by the swirls in the floral design. But the more she stared, the clearer they became, faint, human-like faces etched into the faded wallpaper. Their expressions were hard to decipher, but they seemed watchful. Some smiled, others frowned, and a few looked as though they were crying. "Hey, leave," Ben's voice startled her from behind. "Want to order pizza for dinner?" Olivia shook her head, blinking away the unsettling images. "Yeah, sure," she muttered, turning away from the walls. But even as she followed Ben downstairs, she could feel the eyes from the wallpaper following her every step. That night, Olivia and Ben curled up on the couch with their pizza, watching a classic horror movie. Trick-or-treaters came and went, their giggles and footsteps echoing through the chilly October night. Olivia tried to focus on the movie, but her mind kept drifting back to the wallpaper, those strange faces buried within the floral patterns. After the last of the candy was handed out, they turned off the porch light and headed to bed. Olivia was exhausted from the move, but sleep didn't come easily. The moment she drifted off, strange dreams overtook her. In her dream, Olivia stood in the same second-floor hallway, staring at the wallpaper. But this time, the faces were moving, their eyes blinked slowly, and their mouths stretched into silent screams. Hands pressed against the inside of the wallpaper, as though people were trapped behind it, desperate to escape. Then, one of the faces, a pale woman with sunken eyes, turned to look directly at Olivia. "Why did you come here?" The woman whispered, "We can't leave. And neither will you." Olivia woke with a start, her heart pounding. For a moment, she lay frozen in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent, but she felt an overwhelming sense that she was not alone. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Olivia swore she heard faint whispers coming from the walls, just on the edge of hearing soft, murmuring voices that stopped the moment she tried to listen. Lights flickered unpredictably, and objects seemed to move on their own. Once, Olivia found a photo frame turned upside down on the mantel, though she was certain she hadn't touched it. But the most unsettling thing was the wallpaper. Every time Olivia looked at it, the faces seemed clearer, more detailed, as if they were growing bolder or closer. Some of the faces had distinct features now: a young boy with hollow eyes, a woman with wild, tangled hair, and an elderly man with a twisted, sinister grin. And they were always watching her. Ben thought she was imagining things. "It's just the stress from the move," he said dismissively. "You'll feel better once we're settled in." But Olivia knew something was wrong with the house. The faces in the wallpaper weren't just random patterns, they were people. And they were trying to tell her something. On the night of October 30th, Olivia had another dream. This time, the pale woman appeared again, her sunken eyes filled with sorrow. "Tomorrow night they come," the woman whispered. "When the veil is thinnest, don't be here. Don't let the house take you." Olivia woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. She shook Ben awake, trying to explain the dream. "Something is wrong with this house. Ben, we have to leave before Halloween night." Ben rubbed his eyes, groaning. "Leave? Come on, it's just a dream. We're not leaving just because you're freaked out. I'm serious," Olivia insisted. Something bad is going to happen, but Ben was stubborn. Look, if it makes you feel better, we'll leave for the night tomorrow and stay at a hotel, okay? But right now, can we please just sleep? Reluctantly, Olivia agreed. But deep down, she knew that leaving the house might not be so easy. The next evening, Olivia and Ben packed an overnight bag, planning to leave before nightfall. But as they were getting ready to walk out the front door, something strange happened. The door wouldn't open. Ben jiggled the handle and yanked on the door, but it remained firmly shut, as though it had been sealed from the inside. The windows, too, were locked tight, and even the back door refused to budge. What the hell? Ben muttered, pulling out his phone to call for help. But the phone had no signal, and the Wi-Fi was inexplicably down. It's the house, Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. It doesn't want us to leave. As the clock struck midnight, the lights in the house flickered and went out. In the darkness, the wallpaper seemed to come alive. The faces moved, their mouths stretching into wide, malevolent grins. The hands pressed against the inside of the walls, clawing and tearing at the floral patterns. And from somewhere deep within the house, Olivia heard the soft, rhythmic sound of footsteps. They're coming, she whispered. Ben, we need to hide. They ran upstairs, their flashlights flickering as they stumbled down the narrow hallway. The walls seemed to shift, the wallpaper patterns twisting and changing as they moved. Faces appeared and disappeared, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. At the far end of the hallway, Olivia and Ben found a small attic door. They scrambled inside, slamming it shut behind them. In the cramped space, they huddled together, listening as the footsteps drew closer. Suddenly, the walls around them began to peel, revealing layers upon layers of wallpaper beneath, each layer filled with more faces, more desperate eyes. The faces seemed to pulse and writhe, as though they were trying to break free. We have to get out of here, Ben whispered, panic creeping into his voice. This place is alive. Just as Olivia reached for the attic door, she heard the pale woman's voice again, whispering from the walls. You should never have come. Now you belong to the house. The wallpaper split open, and hands reached out, cold, skeletal hands that grabbed at Olivia and Ben, pulling them toward the walls. They screamed, struggling to break free, but the hands were too strong. In a final, desperate moment, Olivia realized the truth. The house was feeding on them, trapping their souls within the wallpaper like all the others before them. And then the darkness swallowed them whole. The following year, the house went back on the market. A young couple toured the property, marveling at the Victorian charm and beautiful wallpaper. What a steal, the newbier said with a smile. We're lucky to have found this place. As they signed the papers, the faces in the wallpaper watched, their eyes glinting with silent malice. And among the faces, two new ones appeared, Olivia and Ben, trapped forever within the walls of their dream home. And so, the house waited. It always waited for the next Halloween.